Well, hello everybody and welcome to Halton Garden Week. I believe we are on day 4. So glad everybody could join us today. Today I am with Linda Crago and she's from Tree and Twig. Linda owns and operates Tree and Twig Heirloom Vegetable Farm on a little slice of heaven in Niagara, Ontario. 2021 is her 24th year in the business, and over the years she has operated a CSA, attended farmers markets, sold produce to stores and restaurants, sold seed and seedlings for home gardeners, taught workshops, and lectured. As the years roll by, her focus, has narrowed on seed saving and the sales of seedlings, in particular, a huge selection of heirloom and open pollinated tomatoes, and many other rare items for the garden. All produce, seeds, and seedlings are organically grown. We are very lucky to have Linda here with us today to discuss heirlooms and why save seeds. So hello, Linda.
Hello. I'm going to share my screen now. Bear with me. All right. Thank you very much for having me. I'm really pleased to be part of Halton Garden Week. I'll hope not to mess things up. This is my 3rd Zoom presentation, and so far so good. Anyways, I'm really happy to be here today talking about heirloom varieties of vegetables primarily, open pollinated seeds. And I know the next talk is going to really focus in on seed saving, but I will discuss some simple ideas about seed saving. So this is my garden, part of it. It sure doesn't look like that today, although I'm sitting in the basement of my home and I do have a whole light room in my basement where I've started a number of things already. I'll show you the little guy that's sitting beside me soon enough. And you might be interested in what he's starting to produce here. So when you're a gardener and you buy seed or plants, you often hear the terms hybrid and pollinated, heirloom, or sometimes organic gets thrown into the mix, although it's kind of a different concept altogether. And it simply means growing things in an earth-friendly way and not using any chemicals of any form. So let's look at hybrid and what that actually means. So this is a picture I took in local grocery store recently of a hybrid tomato. So a hybrid is a variety that comes about when 2 other varieties cross. And usually when people make these crosses intentionally, they're looking for certain characteristic for the produced fruit to have. It could be earliness, it could be taste, but lots of times hybrids are produced by big commercial seed producers and grown by very large growers. So they may be more interested in looking at varieties that ship well or store well or are uniform in size, not necessarily taste. Although I'm not going to slam hybrids at all because there are some wonderful ones that do taste fantastic. For example, sun gold tomato, sun sugar tomato are 2 super sweet and fantastic varieties. But quite honestly, a lot of hybrids don't taste good. And what they also do is if you find a variety you like, then you're kind of beholden to the seed company to continue buying it from them because you won't likely replicate what they've produced in their hybrid. Hybrids aren't always intentionally created though. Lots of times there are some interesting things that happen in your garden that you think won't cross and usually don't do. For example, in my garden, I've had tomatoes that have produced in my garden that are different from anything I've ever grown before. And I know it's because a couple of varieties have cross-pollinated. And actually, I've been really pleased with some of the crops. And I've gone about trying to, dehybridize them. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. So what are heirlooms? Heirloom varieties are quite simply older varieties. So usually we think about them being at least 50 years old. So they're varieties, older varieties that, my mom grew, my grandparents grew in their gardens. Usually they have, a true heirloom has a family connection. So it's a variety that's been grown in, one family, and those seeds have been passed down in that family. Most importantly, heirlooms are always open pollinated. So that means when I save the seed from an heirloom variety, it will grow true to type as long as I'm, making sure certain safeguards are put in place in my garden. So this is an example of a wonderful, wonderful heirloom tomato. It's called Aunt Ruby's German green tomato. And there actually was an Aunt Ruby. She lived in Tennessee, and tomato had been in her family for generations. And it kind of came to light because of a seed saving organization, Seeders Exchange in the US, and an individual in that that was sharing seed in that organization, Bill Minke from Wisconsin. If you're involved at all with Seeds of Diversity or Seed Savers Exchange, you'll know Bill because he grows absolutely hundreds and hundreds of varieties and offers them through these seed exchanges. So when this seed was passed along to him, he heard about it and shared it in Seed Savers Exchange. And it's just, it's become very popular. In fact, a lot of seed companies, even some larger ones, do carry it now because it's so worthwhile. So it is a green when ripe tomato, always soft to the touch when you're wondering about when green tomatoes are ripe. And you'll also see that little bit of amber color on the bottom. So that tells you it's perfectly ripe. This is another Italian heirloom that grows in the Mount Vesuvius region of Italy. And again, a variety that was handed down through the generations. It's a neat variety because it'll hold on the vine for a long time. So at the end of this growing season, you can pull the plant up and hang it upside down in your basement, and the fruit will slowly ripen and actually last well into the winter. It's a pretty neat variety. When we could travel, in pre-COVID times, I had the good fortune of going to Oaxaca, Mexico, and it's the birthplace of a lot of our varieties of vegetables that have become domesticated. So I was really interested to see the plant that you see looks kind of similar to corn or grass. It's actually the forerunner for modern corn. So this is Teosinte, which came before corn. And breeders, even very amateur breeders, did a lot of work to make it more edible. And that's what it looks like. It's a pretty cool crop. So that's a very old heirloom. Why is it important to grow heirlooms? Well, there's so many reasons. First of all, because they taste good. So as I mentioned, a lot of hybrid varieties aren't grown because they taste good. They're grown for larger commercial growers who have different interests in mind other than taste. There are so many different varieties of every kind of vegetable that it's truly remarkable. It's sort of it's a real awakening when you realize there are more than 10,000 varieties of tomatoes, 40,000 varieties of beans, thousands of peppers, and then things that you've never even heard of before. For example, years ago, in the seed exchange, one of the seed exchanges, I got a kind of cucumber that exploded when it was ripe. It's a really interesting because that's how that variety, continued to spread its seed. It exploded when it was ripe, sort of therefore planting its own seed. And when do you ever open up a seed catalog and see something like that? It's a lot of fun to get involved in some of these varieties. So what's happened with our vegetable varieties over the last, 80 years? I'm going to show you this graphic. This was in a National Geographic magazine. So you can look at the top and see sort of this tree with like a very small root system at the bottom. So at the top, you see all the varieties that were listed in a 1903 catalog. And then you look down and you see 80 years later, how many of those varieties remain. So let's look at lettuce, for example. So in 1903, there were 497 varieties of lettuce in commercial seed catalogs. And we follow that right down to the bottom, and we see in 1983, only 36 varieties remained. And you can follow these down and sort of see how limited we are in our diversity of these vegetables right now. I have heard said that in the last 100 years, we have lost more than 90% of our vegetable varieties. Now, is that something that we should be concerned about? Yeah, for sure, we need to be concerned about it. Let's think back to none of us were, around in the 1800s, but many of us have heard about the Irish potato famine. So, around 1850, and for a number of years thereafter, a lot of people who were, very, very, very poor in Ireland were, depending on the potato as their primary food. And one variety in particular, the Irish lumper. So when potato blight, moved into Ireland, it ended up devastating the potato crops, and actually more than 1 million people died, and over 2 million people needed to leave Ireland in order to survive. That's all doom and gloom, and I'm not saying, it would happen again, but, diversity in our food crops is really a form of security for us. And a lot of people and organizations are understanding this now. So about 31 years ago, a seed vault was set up in Svalbard, Norway. And since that time, over 1 million different varieties of seeds have been given to the vault for storage purposes. So it's, the conditions are ideal, perfect temperatures. The seeds are very safe and secure there. Because, there is a recognition that these seeds can disappear, in times of war, with climate change, and also because maybe some of the countries that have these seeds native to their areas don't have, the financial resources to maintain them. That's always an issue. So actually, even in 2021, I was reading that Mali has deposited close to 3,500 varieties of sorghum, which is a food crop that they're very dependent on. So it's quite interesting, and it's wonderful. Nearly every country in the world, has given seed to this seed vault, so it's safe for the future. I know next you're going to hear from Bob Wildfong. He is the Executive Director of Seeds of Diversity, which is Canada's heritage seed program. And also another organization that's great to be involved with is Seed Savers Exchange in the US. It's a huge nonprofit organization, as is Seeds of Diversity. And their real mission is to preserve these older varieties and even some of the newer open pollinated varieties. So it's not a seed catalog, it's a yearbook, and you write directly to the people who are offering the seed, growers from around the world, request a seed sample, you grow it out, and then you reoffer it in their listings. It's a great way to get involved. It's a great way to meet people whose interests are the same as yours, and it's a fantastic way to learn about some new varieties that you might be interested in growing. New to you, but they may be very old. Can heirlooms be ancient? You bet. When I first started growing, 24 years ago, I sort of had my eyes open to some of the interesting things that were out there through Seeds of Diversity. And once you start understanding what there is out there, the fun just doesn't stop. It is fun. It is fun to grow these varieties and to see something different in your garden, and even more fun to eat them. That's how we keep them going, is by growing them and eating them. So why would you want to plant things from seed? Well, as I've talked about, there are so many varieties that are available only through seed. So you can't go to a garden center and see, 10,000 different varieties of tomatoes, for example. The variety that is available through seeds is never ending. And people are always creating new varieties that, in all likelihood will one day become heirlooms, if they're worthwhile enough. The other reason is some things are just better grown from seeds. So it always kind of, I'm always a little miffed when I see garden centers offering things like, radish transplants, for example. Well, a radish will grow from seed in about 30 days. And if you try to transplant it out of a pot where it's growing with other radish plants, it won't be happy. And no doubt the seed that you've planted will will come along more quickly than the transplant. So carrots, beets, radishes, beans are just simply better when you grow them from seed. And don't be intimidated by it, because seed is, it wants to grow, it wants to reproduce. It's within its biological capacity to do so. Cost is another consideration, although not always huge, but you can buy a pot with 5 bean plants in it, or you can buy a package of 50 bean seed for $3.50. When they grow better from seed, it's probably more reasonable to do it from seed. And then, of course, it's fantastic to plant a seed and to see it grow. What could be more like, it's not like instant gratification, like we like so much in this world, but it is pretty amazing to put, something so tiny in the ground and see, what it can turn into, and even greater when you can turn around and save the seed from a plant that you've grown from seed. You're kind of, completing a whole cycle. So variety, so many different varieties of tomatoes to choose from. I have heard people say that in the last 10 years alone, the world of tomatoes has changed more than in all the preceding years. So there are a lot of amateur breeders out there doing some interesting work with tomatoes in their gardens. And this isn't stuff they're doing in labs, they're doing it in their gardens because they know they have an idea about something they like. They want something that looks different, that tastes different, that is earlier, is later, all kinds of reasons to breed tomatoes in your own garden. And really, when you are saving seed, you are a plant breeder, because you're selecting seed from particular tomato plants or any other plants that you like, and that it will ultimately be well adapted to your area. Variety. These are some hot peppers from my garden, thousands of varieties of hot peppers. And another reason to save seed, is because you simply can't find that seed anywhere. So this is a variety of carrot that I got from a seed saving organization in France. It's an heirloom from Tunisia, so called de Gerbes. So it's a tricolor carrot, purple, red, and yellow, and virtually impossible to find now. So the only reason I have it is because I did save the seed from it. You won't see these in the garden centers. This is a Kiwano melon, also known as African horned melon. Really interesting fruit. It has this, a tropical fruit taste, and then a cucumber flavor. And this is what it looks like when you slice it open. It's really quite cool. And there I am. I'm happy in my greenhouse with all the seeds I've planted. It is very satisfying to grow from seed. And why do you want to save seed? Well, I mentioned the carrot that I saved the seed from. If you find something that you really like in a seed catalog, considering it's open pollinated and you save the seed, you know, it's a very good thing, because seed companies do tend to drop varieties that don't sell well for them. You know, they're in business to make money. So that's why so many varieties have been dropped over the last 100 years, because people were finding, seed companies were finding they didn't sell well. Now, is it a matter of them not being, good varieties? Not at all. There are so many, wonderful varieties that you may find you really like that have been dropped. You know, taste and is an individual thing, as are growing conditions. When you do save seed, you'll also find too that the saved seed that you regrow in your garden will likely do better, because it's used to the conditions that you're giving it. You know, the weather in your area, the soil type you have, the seed has adjusted to that, and that's what it's used to. So much the seed that you buy from some of the bigger companies isn't grown in conditions anything like ours. So that's why, if you're not saving your seed, it's great to buy from someone, smaller, growing and selling seed in your area, because that seed will be more used to the conditions that you're growing in. Unlike seed, from some big supplier who's importing seed from, China or India, where the conditions are very different. And oftentimes too, funny things happen in your garden, like I had said before. So some interesting crosses might happen that you weren't expecting. And there is a way to, and that would be a new hybrid variety, but there is a way, to grow that out over the years. Can continue to reselect until you get a variety that's stable, and then ultimately open pollinated. And then you can also work on some characteristics that you want with these varieties. So you may have a tomato that you really love and you'd like it to be a little bit earlier. So you can sort of, when you plant a bunch of them, you might see one that is earlier. So when you save the seed from that, you're hopefully going to replicate that earliness in the new seed. So this is a variety of tomato that I got, oh gosh, more than 20 years ago. The seed from a seed company in the US that the next year had gone out of business. So Roughwood Golden Tiger, which is a really nice open pollinated heirloom variety. It was a new one to me because it had, fuzzy leaves, Angora leaves, and I'd never grown anything like that. So there are different plant types with tomatoes. So this was a fuzzy leaf tomato, and actually the tomato has a little bit of fuzz on it as well. I'm not sure if you can see that, but I love the variety and saved the seed, and now the seed isn't actually commercially available anywhere. So that's a good reason to save seed. This bean, I'm still working on stabilizing it. I think I'm nearly there, but it was a natural cross that happened in my garden. So 2 bean varieties cross-pollinated, which doesn't usually happen, but it certainly can. So I saw that cross in the resulting seed that I saved. So the bean actually, I think that one of the parents is dragon tongue, which is a big, fat, pale yellow bean with purple striping. But this seed that I saved produces a very slim pale yellow bean with purple striping. So I believe it's a cross between a golden fillet bean and the dragon tongue bean. So this tomato is one of my favorite varieties, called Stupice, actually pronounced Stupichka. It's a little Czechoslovakian variety. And I've worked on getting it probably about 10 days earlier than my original seed. So that's another thing that can happen when you save seed. And then again, strange things happen in the garden. So this is a variety of kale, lacinato kale, which is typically like a very dark green strap-leafed kale, but it ended up becoming a variegated variety in my garden. So by saving the seed of this variety, I've got this brand new, like ultra cool, good looking and tasting variety. So I'm going to talk a little bit about saving seed and some things to think about. So first of all, as I've mentioned before, a hybrid variety won't come true if you save the seed. So you won't get from the seed what the parent plant was. It'll go back, who knows how many different generations, and you'll get these different things. whereas an open pollinated variety will come true to type from saved seed. But I'm a firm believer in not having any rules in the garden. So if you're a home gardener and you want to save seed from hybrid, or you're a grower, just save the seed from a hybrid and see what happens. You may get something that's interesting and desirable, and you can grow it out over a number of years, and reselect for the type of tomato or fruit or vegetable that you like. And then ultimately end up with a stable variety. So if you're growing true heirlooms, there is a benefit in making sure the varieties are pure, especially if you're involved with seed saving organizations. You want to make sure the seed you're sharing represents that variety. So you can do a few things. You can limit the varieties that you're planting. So if I want to make sure my seed is pure, I could plant, one variety of cucumber, one variety of squash, one variety of, tomato, although they don't generally cross-pollinate, so one of each type thing, and then you should have no problems. But of course, you don't know what your neighbors are growing, so check on that as well. You can also set up, physical barriers. So that could be something like, on one side of my house, I have a garden, but then I have the house, and then I have another garden on the other side. Or it could be something as simple as, agricultural cloth made into bags that cover the blossoms. Timing. So saving corn seed is a challenge, but if you're trying to save seed from a couple varieties, it can really cross readily if you're growing two corn types at the same time. So if you stagger your plantings 2 weeks apart, then the corn will be pollinating at a different time, and you shouldn't have any problems. Or distance. So corn, for example, needs to be, if you're planting two varieties at the same time, then you have to ensure there's a distance of, 2 miles. So, maybe that's not realistic unless a gardener, 5 miles down the road or whatever. But in a garden, something like tomatoes, which generally won't cross-pollinate, it could be 20 feet in the garden and you should be safe. I'm going to show you some pictures from Heritage Farm, which is Seed Savers Exchange home base in Decorah, Iowa, just to show you some of their seed saving barriers that they've set up. So you can see, these are their seed saving gardens. And when we get close, these are the barriers that they've set up, so cross-pollination isn't happening. Inside these tents are the varieties that they're going to keep pure seed from. And then inside some of the bigger barriers, they have a number of different things planted, sort of like I just mentioned, one pepper, one tomato, one bean, one thing that won't cross. But, if they were sort of around all those other varieties, they might. So they've set up these tents, so those varieties are going to be pure. And then actually inside, they've even put beehives to ensure that these crops are cross-pollinated. When you're saving seed, you should know your plants, your environment, and your pollinators. So, what are your plants and what's going to cross with what? Your environment. So are you in do you have a lot of other gardeners around you? Is there a chance your crops can cross with this? Are you windy? Do you have a lot of bee ground? These are all things you want to be aware of. So plants, for example. So what are you really growing and what will it cross with? So again, we go back to this guy, the Kiwano melon, which is pretty awesome and I love it, but the name is deceiving because it's actually a cucumber, not a melon. So this will cross with other cucumbers. So it's a good idea to check the Latin names on seed packages when you're growing things, if you're thinking about saving seed, so you know what something truly is. And this is called a striped Armenian cucumber, but it's actually not a cucumber at all. It's a melon and it will cross with other melons. Even though it looks similar to a cucumber and it tastes like a very sweet, mild cucumber, it's absolutely fantastic, but it's a melon. And be aware that some things can cross super easily. So the original member of the brassica family was like a non-heading cabbage. And then by amateur breeders over the years, worked on different things they could create out of this. So out of it came kale, cabbage, kohlrabi, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, and cauliflower, and they can all cross. So they can be things that are more difficult to save seed from in your garden. And then vegetables may have weedy relatives. So the carrot in your garden can easily cross-pollinate with Queen Anne's lace, which is in, ditches all over here, and I'm sure it is pretty much all over everywhere in Ontario too. And know how your plants pollinate. Do they need wind pollination? Are they self-pollinating? Do they need lots of bees around? And are they annuals or biennials? Will you get the seed in the first year? That's an annual. Or will you get the seed in the second year? That's a biennial. So let's look at some things that are selfers. That means a plant that has a perfect flower and the male and female parts are in one single flower on the plant. So that is tomatoes, for example. So this is a variety, German variety called Lychee Tomato, which is really a cool tomato. It's like cherry tomatoes all fused together. And the fun thing about this is every tomato on the plant is different. There's nothing that's uniform about any of the tomatoes. So you can have a crazy one like this, or one that, is just sort of a ring, a flat ring of cherry tomatoes fused together. But tomatoes are very easy to save seed from because, as I said, the male and female parts are in one flower. I'll show you a few other of my favorite tomatoes. Pink Zapotec ribbed, which is a really nice old variety, just gorgeous. This is a newer open pollinated variety, Cherokee Rose, that is was found in a field of Cherokee Purple, which is a really well-loved heirloom tomato. And as I said before, there are more than 10,000 varieties of tomatoes, and people are working all the time with coming up with new open pollinated varieties. You see lots of blues and stripes and really, really interesting ones. But some of the old heirlooms are really some of the tastiest ones. White bicolor, green, black, purple, orange. You can make an orange spaghetti sauce with orange paste tomatoes. The diversity is incredible. And this was a natural cross that I had happen in my garden, and I think I've pretty much helped it along to becoming a stable variety. So it's a blue currant that you can see in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. So this was, again, a natural cross in my garden. And just by growing it out over the years, I ended up selecting for the variety that I wanted it to be, which is a fun thing to do in your garden. And as I said before, hybrid varieties can be saved. I know a couple years ago, when I was in the grocery store, I saw a really nice little orange grape tomato, and I thought the taste was pretty good. So I thought I would try to dehybridize it. So over the years, I ended up, I planted it the first year. I got a bunch of varieties of it, variations on it. So I only saved the seed from the fruit that I like the best, from the plants I like the fruit of. And it's turned into this interesting little peanut orange tomato, which is really prolific and really nice and sweet. I've got a little bit more stabilizing to do, but it's certainly getting there. It's a fun thing to do. This is a really great little heirloom tomato, a Russian heirloom called House. And you can actually see, I have one in front of me, and it's got a little red tomato on it. So House variety only grows to be about, a foot high, ends up loaded with tomatoes during our growing season when it's outside. But theoretically, it's small enough that you can pot it up and bring it into your house in the winter, either under lights or in a south-facing window, and end up with a little bit of fruit during the winter, which is really nice. This is Wessel's Purple Pride, a beautiful, prolific purple paste tomato. And this is a newer variety. This is Black Beauty, which is the darkest. I'm showing it to you because it's the darkest tomato that I've ever grown. It's really a lovely tomato. It's shocking how dark it is. Again, open pollinated, and that's what it looks like when you slice into it. To my mind, that looks better than any grocery store tomato that's out there right now. And Lithium Sunset, that's another beautiful bicolor open pollinated variety. So saving tomato seed is actually really easy. You look for healthy fruit on healthy plants. The fruit should be ripe or a little bit overripe, but certainly not rotting on the plant. Squish the innards into a dish. I usually add a little water so I know it's not going to dry out. It develops this mold on top, which theoretically breaks down some bacteria on the seed, although now they don't think it breaks down as much as I had thought, but it does clean the seed quite well. It takes off that little bit of gel that surrounds the seed that prevents it from sprouting in the tomato. And then simply just clean the seed under cold running water in a sieve, dry it, and you're good to go for next year. Then there's a whole bunch of other cool things in the Solanum family that you can save seed from. This is a picture of Morel de Balbi, also known as lychee tomato. It's really a scary looking plant when you see it in the garden. It's got these terrific thorns. But leave the seed from. Simply, follow the process of squeezing out the seed, cleaning it in water, and then laying it out to dry. Tomatillas, ground cherries, Cape gooseberries are similar. I usually put mine in a blender fill the blender with water. The good seed will sit at the bottom, and the pulp and seed will float to the top and drain off the water and the stuff on top until you put the seed on the bottom and dry it again. Beans are another self-pollinating plant that don't usually cross-pollinate. That's dragon tongue on the left and purple potted pole on the right. This is Jacob's cattle, a wonderful old heirloom bean. And beans couldn't be easier to save seed from. With most things, when you're saving seed, you actually get to eat, the remnants. So when you're saving tomato seed, for example, you can eat everything except the pulp and the seeds. And with beans, if you dry too many on your plants, you've got dried beans for the winter for your soups and stews. So you just leave the plants to dry in the garden until the fall and harvest your seed for next year. Peppers are again self-pollinating, so usually you will save the seed from them when they're nice and ripe. And red, that means. So a green pepper isn't ripe, it's an unripe pepper. But as I said before, just because things generally don't cross-pollinate, it doesn't mean they won't. Lots of people have saved seed from sweet and hot peppers and had their sweet pepper seed end up producing a hot pepper. Eggplants are the same, self-pollinating. White egg eggplant is the one on the left. Looks like an egg, so that's the reason eggplants were called eggs, a very old variety. And then this is one of my favorites, green pea eggplant, which is from Thailand. Grows about 7 feet high, and it's got little eggplants that are the size of green peas. With eggplants, you wait until the fruit is overripe, so it's starting to turn yellow. This is my favorite lettuce called Bronzero lettuce. Lettuce, you simply leave it in the garden past the eating stage. It'll send up its seed stalk. It'll have nice little yellow flowers that look like miniature dandelions that turn to fluff. Let the whole thing dry, and then I usually put a paper bag over the head and cut the seed stalk, turn the seed stalk into the paper bag, and then I have my seed for next year. You can also, if you're wanting to grow your lettuce in pots, you can use the barriers to ensure there's no cross-pollination. And there's my lettuce seed. Usually drop some on the ground, so I've got lots of started already in my garden for the next spring. So these are Biennials Beets. So we've got our yellow intermediate mango, which are the long yellow ones, the cylindrical, the whites, the goldens. There's so many great varieties of beets as well. And then in the center of that basket, you see my beautiful mango. Mangoes have been around for thousands of years. I think I had read they were first cultivated, in the year 1000. So they've been around for a long, long time. And a lot of people have depended on those to the point that in England, I think it was after the First World War, there ended up being a disease named after the mango wurzel. But I've read some funny things about mangles. So they were developed to be fed to livestock, but when you get them nice and small, they're really quite tender and they taste just like beets. Of course, that's the family they're in. Lots of people have used them over time for fermenting to use as an alcoholic beverage. Or I read in England the sport where you actually hurl them. I'm not sure if you're hurling them, no. So you can measure how far they've gone, or you're hurling them at another person. But if you were hurling them at another person, it could hurt because they're massive. That's actually a full-size bushel basket you're looking at with them in it. But I do store them in the winter, and when we've run out of beets, they're really a great winter storage vegetable. Carrots are biennials, so you're going to get the seed second year as well. This is dragon carrot, which is a wonderful old heirloom with the purple skin and the orange flesh. It actually does, unlike purple beans that turn green, it does stay purple when you cook it. So to get the seed in the second year, you have to replant the vegetables from the first year. So you've got to store them over the winter. So you dig them up. I store mine in my garage in barrels layered with dry straw, and they store really well. And usually, actually right now I'm starting to see a little bit of growth on my carrots and beets. They're wanting to get going. So this is what they look like right now. They've got a little ways to wait. Usually April, I'll go out in the garden and I'll dig some planting holes. I'll replant them, and then they start setting about their business. They send up their seed stock. It can be a good number of months before they develop their seed, but you get a lot of seed. It's worth the wait. So on the right is the mango that I've replanted and saved over winter. On the left is a cabbage. So it's a biennial as well. I've saved it over the winter. I pull it up by the roots and store it in my barrels and then replant it. I put a little cross on the top and my seed stalks will shoot up. This is beet seed, and I let it dry on the plant until it's ready. Chard is the same. It produces its seed in the second year. If you do get plants producing your seed in the first year, you don't want that in a beet or chard. Chances are when you save that seed, it's going to go to seed again in the first year, and you actually want to eat more than you want to save seeds. So you don't want to save that seed. This is an interesting specimen of a winter radish, long black Spanish, that was in my garden. And it's another vegetable I have to overwinter and replant in the spring, which I've done. I've dug my planting hole. Get my radish seed, which if you have too much, you can actually eat those pods. They're really good. And there's my seed when it's mature and has dried on the plant. Parsnips couldn't be easier to save seed from. Just leave them in the garden, all the ones you don't want to eat, and you'll get just a mass of seed. Most of the brassicas, cabbage, kale, cauliflower, are plants that produce their seed in the second year. Sometimes you can get broccoli in the first year, or you can wait till the second, but you have to overwinter those plants as well. So you replant. Usually, I'll pot them up, bring them in the garage for the winter, and then replant in the spring. And then you'll get your seeds developing in the second year. Onions are the same. Replant in the spring. Sometimes they'll actually overwinter, depending on the kind of winter we've had. And then you have your plants that are more difficult to save seed from. So these are plants, like, for example, members of the squash family. I'm not going to go into specifics, but there are different species that will not cross with each other. So for example, an acorn squash won't cross with a butternut squash because they're different species, but they can cross like mad if they are the same species. So you can end up with all kinds of crazy things. So if you're planting more than one variety in the same species, you do have to self-pollinate. So interestingly enough, on a squash plant, or cucumber, they have a female flower and a male flower. And it's easy to tell which one is the female because it's the one with the little growth already on the plant. So you will have to, you take the pollen from the male and put it on the female flower. And it's a matter of timing when the blossom is going to open. So you have to be aware of that and be in your garden and watching, which is always a great idea when you're an organic gardener looking for problems, disease, pests, that sort of thing. So you'll be in your garden anyways, so you'll get to know the best time to do these self-pollination techniques. If you let sort of things cross on their own, then you end up with crazy things. Some are edible, some are certainly not edible. Corn is another one that is really prone to cross-pollinating with other corn varieties. So you have to be really careful of that, especially if you're out in the country and you've got people growing their field corn. So again, watch to see when other people are planting their corn and stagger it as best you can. Then we have these plants that are quite different again. So they have a male and a female plant. Spinach is one. So there are actually male and female spinach plants, much as say, for example, some fruit trees or hollies need both male and a female to be pollinated. Spinach is the same, although you'll get both in one seed package. So before I finish up, I'm just going to show you some other fun things you can think about growing in your garden. So this is globe artichoke, which is a really great vegetable and grows really well in our climate. Quite prolific producer. This is a funny little cucumber from the West Indies called West Indian burr cucumber. So it's kind of spiny, but it's perfectly edible that way. The spines don't hurt your mouth or your throat at all when you're eating them. It's really sweet, really lovely. And then people are getting to know this guy. This is muskmelon or cucamelon, which is a really sweet little sort of sourish cucumbery flavor. It grows on about a 3-foot trellis. It's very small, great for small gardens. Wonderberry, which is kind of a neat berry created by Luther Burbank from California. So it's very small, not as small as an elderberry, but it's got a sweetish, I always think kind of a wine flavor, although I don't think I've ever heard anybody else describe it that way, but it's a great little plant to grow. It's a terrific self-seeder. Cape gooseberry, which is native to Peru. So it's a ground cherry relative in the Physalis family, but it needs a longer growing season, I guess because it's native to Peru, but it's got a beautiful like zingy tart taste, which is really addictive. It's just a great fruit to grow. And then we've got these funny little guys, Szechuan Buttons, they're often called, or toothache plant. So it's a funny sensation when you eat these, which you do, because it causes kind of a tingly feeling in your mouth, like you've just visited the dentist. You may not think that's pleasant, but it's kind of funny. I've been growing cotton for a few years now and actually succeeding in getting the cotton balls. So it's another crop I'd like to see if I can shorten the growing season for by saving seed. Just a stunning plant all the way around. This one is red foliated. It's got a beautiful hibiscus-like flower. This is Sesame Seeds, so they do grow well in our climate. No pests, no problems. I direct seeded mine when I grow them, but I know you can start them earlier from plants, but this whole will dry up. The pods will turn brown and you find the little sesame seeds stacked up inside little pods. This is a very ancient grain called Job's Tears, which is in the millet family. It is edible, but it's also ornamental and been used for thousands of years in jewelry making. It's a pretty cool crop. This is what it looks like when it's ready to plant, or even if harvested it. And that's the end of my presentation. I'm in the middle of getting people to sign up for appointments now. If you're interested in checking out my selection of heirloom tomato seedlings, I've got about 500 varieties if you come in person, or over 100 varieties on my pre-order list. You can check out my website, and I can't wait till winter's over and I can get back in the garden. I think it's really important for everybody now that we're, in the middle of a pandemic. The garden's a great place to spend some time and stay sane. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Linda. That was amazing. I can't believe all these unusual varieties you have. They're just spectacular. So we've got some questions, and just to let everybody know, if you bring your mouse down to the bottom, you'll see, it looks like a speech bubble and it says chat. Click on that and it'll open up the chat bar. If you're on feed loop, you might have to expand your screen and you can see the chat on the right-hand side, and you can answer your questions or ask your questions down in the bottom. So to start with, wow, we had a question about climate change. Are you seeing any changes on growing times or seed saving or anything that's affected by climate change at the moment?
For sure. Like I know when, I started farming 24 years ago, the seasons were like pretty predictable, but it's so far from predictable anymore. Like you just don't know. You just don't know. We can have a super year of drought. We can have a year where there's too much rain. And we have had those in, the last 10 years. It's been extreme. I have a really heavy clay soil, so I can survive a drought. But if we get a really rainy season, it's just really difficult. I know last spring when I was selling the seedlings, it was May and I was walking people back to the greenhouse and it was, it was snowing. It's just that unpredictability. You just don't know. And that's why seed saving, is important. That's why the seed vault in Norway is important, because we just don't know. Mm-hmm. So yeah, absolutely.
And what makes a paste tomato a paste tomato?
It's not as juicy. So it's a meatier variety. I think my most popular paste tomato would be San Marzano, which is it's an Italian heirloom. It's, very meaty, really delicious flavor, just not as juicy. Yeah, that's the important thing. Not as juicy. Small seed cavity.
Okay. And say you did harvest your tomato and you collected the seeds, and then you realized when it was a variety you hadn't really tried before that it wasn't as ripe as it should have been. Why does picking them right to save seeds matter? Like if you picked it and it wasn't quite ripe, is that are the seeds not viable anymore, or what happens?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like what could I compare it to? If it's like I mentioned with the green pepper, like it's totally unripe. The seed's not mature. It's like when I don't know, I don't want to compare it to being pregnant, but, but it's kind of the same thing. Like, you can have a premature birth and you've got, you may have difficulties. Whereas if you carry to term, it's healthier and so it's kind of the same thing. Like we're all, interconnected that way. So yeah, that's exactly it.
It's a good analogy. Sarah from Facebook asked, how long do seeds last when you save them yourself, and how long do you leave them to dry out?
Well, so really, I'll answer the second part of that question first. So it depends on the seed type. I usually will leave mine a week to the seeds to dry out, but what I want is for the seed to sort of snap when I try to break it, instead of sort of just, turn to mush. So usually about a week. And I don't do that in direct sun. I do it in my house. So it's in a warm environment in the house, and it'll usually take about a week. And then I know I'm really sure. And then the other part of that is, how long do seeds last? Well, it really depends on what you're saving seed from and how you save it. So the most important thing with seed saving is to make sure your seeds are cool and dry. So if you're saving your seed, and you put it in an old shed and it's damp, then you're not going to have the seed, remain viable for as long. I have a freezer, like a chest freezer, and I put my seed, in airtight, jars. or plastic, Ziploc bags. And I don't love using plastic, but it does work. And I sink them right in the bottom of the freezer. Some people will say, oh, never save your seed in a freezer, but I do. And I've certainly had tomato seed viable for more than 10 years, bean seed, squash seed. Those are some that'll last a long time. Whereas other things like onions, celery, parsley, most people will say, 1 year viable. Sometimes it's a couple years, but so it depends on the seed variety, and it depends how you save it.
I think you've got more than one person impressed that you were able to grow cotton. So, how is that possible in our cold climate?
That's funny, isn't it? Like when there's so many interesting crops around the world that we can actually grow, and sometimes it's a little more work. Like with cotton, I'm going to start mine this week, so it's going to be like early. I'll start it early. It needs a long growing season, but you can seek out varieties that have a shorter growing season, and that red foliated cotton is one. So I started early inside, and then when the weather's warm, I put it out, and I just hope it's a good long growing season. I don't always get it, but it doesn't matter to me particularly. I do like to get it because I like to save the seed from it, but the flowers it produces are spectacular regardless. So it's a great plant to have in your garden.
Well, thank you very much, Linda. We are running out of time, unfortunately, but we will be sharing Linda's details and her pre-order list in our networking section. And contact us if you can't find that. And contact Linda. We'll have her details if you have any questions about her varieties, or if you want to follow up with anything she's spoken about. We will have a meet and greet at the end of the week if you have general gardening questions that our experts from Oakville Horticultural Society will answer. But it's just been a delight to speak with you today and see all those amazing vegetables, Linda. This has been a real treat to have you on today. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Happy gardening, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.